The dust hung thick in the air as Victoria Harper watched the banker's wagon pull away from what used to be her home, the document of foreclosure still clutched in her trembling hand. The year was 1879, and Fort Worth, Texas had just gotten a whole lot lonelier for a 24-year-old widow with nothing but the clothes on her back and memories of better days. Her husband Thomas had died 3 months prior from pneumonia, leaving behind debts she never knew existed, and a farm that the bank claimed faster than a rattlesnake could strike. She stood there on the dirt road, her dark hair escaping from its pins, her calico dress covered in the fine Texas dust that seemed to coat everything in this part of the country. The ranch house behind her, the one Thomas had built with his own 2 hands, now belonged to First National Bank. The cattle were already sold off to pay part of the debt. The chickens had been taken by neighbors who promised to care for them. Everything was gone. Victoria had nowhere to go. Her parents had passed years ago before she married Thomas. She had a sister somewhere in Missouri, but they had not spoken in 5 years after a disagreement Victoria could barely remember now. Pride had kept them apart, and now that same pride made the thought of begging for help unbearable. "Mrs. Harper," a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Samuel Thompson, a cowboy she had seen around town but never really spoken to. He was tall, probably 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. He removed his hat as he approached, his dark hair matted down from wearing it all day in the scorching sun. "I heard about what happened," Samuel said, his voice gentle despite the roughness that came from years of shouting over cattle and wind. "I am real sorry for your loss. Your husband, and now the farm." Victoria straightened her spine, trying to maintain whatever dignity she had left. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That is kind of you to say. You got somewhere to go?" he asked, genuine concern creasing his brow. The question hit her harder than she expected. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall in front of this stranger. "I will figure something out. I always do." Samuel shifted his weight from one boot to the other, clearly uncomfortable but determined to speak his mind. "Mrs. Harper, I know we do not know each other well, but I cannot stand by and watch a decent woman be put out on the street. My mother runs a boarding house on the east side of town. She always needs help with the cooking and cleaning. The pay is not much, but it comes with a room and 3 meals a day." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. There was no pity in his eyes, just honest kindness. She had seen too much pity in the last 3 months, from neighbors who whispered behind their hands about poor Thomas Harper drinking himself into an early grave, about poor Victoria who never saw it coming. But Samuel Thompson looked at her like she was a person who had hit a rough patch, not a charity case. "I would need to speak with your mother first," Victoria said carefully, "but I appreciate the offer more than you know." "Of course," Samuel said, replacing his hat. "I can take you there now if you would like. I have my horse just over there." Victoria glanced back at the farmhouse one more time. The windows reflected the late afternoon sun, making it impossible to see inside to the rooms she had cleaned and decorated, to the life she had tried to build. Then she turned away from it all and nodded to Samuel. The ride to Mrs. Thompson's boarding house was quiet. Victoria sat behind Samuel on his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty. She had to hold onto Samuel's waist to keep from sliding off, and she could feel the solid muscle beneath his shirt, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. It had been so long since she had been this close to anyone. Thomas had been sick for months before he died, and even before that, things between them had been strained. Mrs. Thompson was a round, cheerful woman in her early 50s with the same dark eyes as her son. She welcomed Victoria into her home without hesitation, showing her to a small room on the second floor that overlooked the street. It was sparse but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a window that let in the evening breeze. "You start tomorrow," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "Breakfast is at 6, and I will show you the routine then. Samuel speaks highly of you, says you are a hard worker." Victoria nearly laughed at that. Samuel barely knew her, but when she caught his eye over his mother's shoulder, she saw a slight smile playing at his lips, and she understood. He had vouched for her, given his word so she would have a chance. The weight of that kindness settled over her like a blanket. The weeks that followed were the hardest Victoria had ever worked in her life. Mrs. Thompson ran a tight ship, with 8 boarders who all expected hot meals, clean sheets, and a tidy house. Victoria was up before dawn, helping to prepare breakfast, then cleaning rooms, doing laundry, and starting on the midday meal before the last breakfast dish was dried. Her hands became rough and red from lye soap and hot water. Her back ached from hauling buckets and scrubbing floors. But she had a roof over her head and food in her belly, and that was more than she had expected a month ago. Samuel came by often to visit his mother. Victoria noticed he always seemed to time his visits around mealtimes, and Mrs. Thompson always insisted he stay and eat. He would sit at the big dining table with the boarders, but his eyes would find Victoria as she served the food, and he would smile at her in a way that made her heart do strange things in her chest. One evening, after the supper dishes were done and the boarders had retired to their rooms, Samuel found Victoria sitting on the back porch, taking a rare moment to rest. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the heat of the day finally breaking into something bearable. "Mind if I sit?" Samuel asked. Victoria gestured to the empty chair beside her. "It is your mother's house. You can sit wherever you please." "True enough," Samuel said, settling into the chair with a creak of old wood, "but I still like to ask." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of Fort Worth settling in for the night. Dogs barking in the distance, a baby crying in a neighboring house, the clop of horse hooves on the street out front. "How are you doing?" Samuel finally asked. "Really doing, I mean. Not just the polite answer you give when folks ask." Victoria considered lying, giving him the same response she gave everyone else. But there was something about Samuel Thompson that made her want to be honest. Maybe it was because he had helped her without asking for anything in return. Maybe it was because his eyes were kind. Or maybe it was because she was so tired of pretending to be fine when she was barely holding herself together. "Some days are better than others," she admitted. "I miss my home. Not Thomas, if I am being truthful, which probably makes me a terrible person. But I miss having a place that was mine. I miss knowing what tomorrow would look like." Samuel nodded slowly. "That does not make you terrible. Thomas was not an easy man from what I heard, and grief is complicated. You can miss the life you had without missing every part of it." "You are very wise for a cowboy," Victoria said, a hint of teasing in her voice. Samuel laughed, a warm sound that made Victoria smile despite herself. "My mother would argue with you on that. She thinks I am about as wise as a fence post most days." "Well, fence posts serve an important purpose," Victoria said. "They keep things from wandering off where they should not go." "Is that what I do?" Samuel asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Keep things from wandering off?" Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the warm evening air. "I suppose you did, in a way. I was wandering, and you gave me a place to land." Samuel reached over and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of working with rope and reins, but his touch was careful, almost tentative. "Victoria, I want you to know that I did not help you because I felt sorry for you. I helped you because from the moment I first saw you in town last year, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever laid eyes on. And when I heard what happened, I could not stand the thought of you struggling alone when I could do something about it." Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Samuel could hear it. "You saw me last year, at the church social in September," Samuel said. "You were wearing a blue dress and you were laughing at something Mrs. Peterson said. I wanted to introduce myself, but you were married, and I was not the kind of man to disrespect that. So I kept my distance and tried not to think about you too much, which did not work very well." "I do not remember seeing you there," Victoria said softly. "I am good at blending into the background when I want to," Samuel said. "It is a useful skill when you are trying not to stare at another man's wife." Victoria did not know what to say to that. Part of her was flattered, warmed by the knowledge that this good man had noticed her, had thought about her. But another part of her felt guilty, like she was betraying Thomas's memory by having these feelings so soon after his death. Samuel must have seen the conflict on her face because he squeezed her hand gently and then let go. "I am not asking you for anything, Victoria. I just wanted you to know that you are not alone. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like the chance to court you properly." Before Victoria could respond, Mrs. Thompson appeared in the doorway. "Samuel, are you pestering my best worker?" "No, madam," Samuel said, standing quickly. "Just keeping her company for a minute." "Well, come inside and help me move that bureau in the front room." "My back is not what it used to be," Mrs. Thompson said, though the twinkle in her eye suggested she knew exactly what she was interrupting. Samuel tipped his hat to Victoria and followed his mother inside, leaving Victoria alone with her racing thoughts and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of hope blooming in her chest. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments with Samuel. He found excuses to come by the boarding house more often. Sometimes he would help his mother with repairs around the property. Sometimes he would bring fresh meat from a hunt. And sometimes he would just show up at the back door with wildflowers he claimed he found on the side of the road, though Victoria suspected he rode out of his way to pick them for her. They talked about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about his life as a cowboy, working for the various ranches around Fort Worth, saving up money to buy his own land someday. Victoria told him about growing up in a small town outside of San Antonio, about her brief, troubled marriage to Thomas, about her dreams of having a place to call her own again. "What happened to your farm?" Samuel asked one evening as they sat on the back porch again, their usual spot. "I heard Thomas left debts, but I never heard the whole story." Victoria sighed, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the cooling night air. "Thomas liked to gamble. I did not know how much until after he died. He borrowed money from the bank, using the farm as collateral. Then he borrowed more to pay back the first loan, and then more after that. By the time he passed, we owed more than the farm was worth. The bank gave me 30 days to come up with the money or vacate. I had nothing. No family money, no savings. Everything we had went to paying for his funeral and his other debts." "How much did you owe?" Samuel asked quietly. $800, Victoria said. The number still made her stomach turn. It might as well have been 8,000 for all the chance she had of raising it. "The bank auctioned it off 2 weeks ago. Some businessman from Dallas bought it for 600, probably planning to turn it into something profitable." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing over his words carefully. "What would you do if you got it back?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is not going to happen, Samuel. I do not have $600. I do not have $60. "But if you could," Samuel pressed, "what would you do with it?" Victoria let herself imagine it for a moment, even though it hurt to hope for impossible things. I would raise cattle, good breeding stock, and chickens, lots of chickens. The land is perfect for it, good grass, a creek running through the back 40. Thomas never used it right, too busy drinking and gambling to see what he had, but I could make it work, I know I could. Then you should have it, Samuel said simply. Samuel, we have been over this, I cannot afford it. But I can, Samuel said, turning to face her fully. I have been saving for years to buy my own place. I have almost $700 put away. I could buy it back for you. Victoria felt like all the air had been sucked from her lungs. Samuel, no, I could never accept that. It is too much. Why? Samuel asked, his dark eyes intense. Why is it too much? Because you think you do not deserve it. Because you think it makes you obligated to me. Victoria, I am not offering this to trap you or buy your affection. I am offering it because you deserve to have the life you want, and I have the means to help you get it. And what do you get out of it? Victoria asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Because nobody does something like this without wanting something in return. Samuel flinched like she had slapped him, but he did not back down. I get to see you happy. I get to watch you build the life you were meant to have. And maybe, if I am very lucky and you eventually feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, I get to be part of that life. But even if that never happens, even if you take that farm and never want to see me again, it would be worth it just to know you are where you belong. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. How can you say things like that? How can you be so good? I am not that good, Samuel said, reaching out to gently wipe away her tears with his thumb. I am selfish enough to hope that you will fall in love with me. I am impatient enough to want to kiss you right now, even though I know it is too soon. And I am foolish enough to think that maybe, just maybe, this could work out for both of us. What if it does not work? Victoria whispered. What if I take your money and fail? What if the farm does not make enough to pay you back? Then we try something else, Samuel said. But I do not think you will fail. You are the strongest, most determined woman I have ever met. If anyone can make that farm prosper, it is you. Victoria closed her eyes, trying to think clearly despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. Every practical part of her brain was screaming that this was too much, too soon, too risky. But her heart, her bruised and battered heart that had been locked away for so long, was whispering something different. It was whispering that maybe, just maybe, she could trust this man. Maybe she could accept his help and not lose herself in the process. If I agree to this, Victoria said slowly, opening her eyes to meet Samuel's hopeful gaze, it has to be a loan, a proper loan with terms and interest. I will pay you back every cent, even if it takes me 10 years. 5% interest, Samuel said immediately, standard rate, and you can take as long as you need to pay it back. I trust you. Why? Victoria asked, still unable to quite believe this was happening. You barely know me. I know enough, Samuel said. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you are honest, even when the truth is difficult. I know you have been knocked down by life more times than anyone should be, and you keep getting back up. That is all I need to know. Victoria took a deep breath, her decision made even though it terrified her. Okay, yes, I will accept your loan with the terms we discussed. And Samuel, thank you. I do not think I can ever properly express what this means to me. Samuel's face broke into a wide grin, and Victoria realized she had never seen him smile like that before, completely unguarded and joyful. You just did. The next day, Samuel went to the bank in Dallas where the farm had been sold. It took him 3 days to track down the buyer, a businessman named Charles Morton, who had indeed purchased the property as an investment. Morton was surprised when Samuel offered him $700 for a property he had bought for $600 just 2 weeks earlier, but he was not foolish enough to turn down a quick profit. They signed the papers that very afternoon. Samuel rode back to Fort Worth with the deed to Victoria's farm in his saddlebag, feeling lighter than he had in years. He had depleted his savings, the money he had worked so hard to accumulate, but he did not regret it for a moment. The look on Victoria's face when he gave her the deed would be worth every penny. He found her in the kitchen of the boarding house, up to her elbows in bread dough. Her face was flushed from the heat of the oven, wisps of dark hair escaping from her bun to curl around her face. She looked beautiful and strong and entirely herself, and Samuel felt his heart squeeze in his chest. "Victoria, can I speak to you for a moment?" he asked from the doorway. She looked up, surprised. "Samuel, I thought you were in Dallas. When did you get back?" "Just now," he said. "Come outside with me." Victoria wiped her hands on her apron and followed him to the back porch, their spot. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Samuel reached into his jacket and pulled out the deed, the paper crisp and official-looking. "What is this?" Victoria asked, though her hands were already trembling as she reached for it. "The deed to your farm," Samuel said simply. "Signed over to you free and clear. Well, except for the loan from me, but that is between us." Victoria unfolded the paper with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the words that transferred ownership of the property from Charles Morton to her, Victoria Harper. Her name, right there in black ink, her farm, her home. "I do not understand," she whispered. "How did you do this so fast?" "Morton was eager to sell," Samuel said. "Turns out he had already lined up another investment opportunity and was happy to make a quick profit on your place. So I bought it from him and had him sign it directly over to you. It is yours, Victoria, completely yours." Victoria looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Then, before Samuel could react, she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss or a tentative one. It was fierce and grateful and full of all the emotions she had been holding back for weeks. Samuel wrapped his arms around her waist and kissed her back, forgetting about propriety and timing and everything except the feeling of Victoria in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed through her tears. "I am sorry. I should not have done that." "Do not apologize," Samuel said, his voice rough. "I have been dreaming about kissing you for longer than I care to admit." "I cannot believe you did this," Victoria said, looking down at the deed still clutched in her hand. "I cannot believe the farm is mine again." "Believe it," Samuel said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "And I am going to help you fix it up if you will let me. I know it has been sitting empty for a few weeks, and places can go downhill fast when nobody is caring for them." "You have done enough," Victoria protested weakly. "I have done exactly what I wanted to do," Samuel countered. "But if it makes you feel better, you can pay me for my labor in home-cooked meals. Your biscuits are better than my mother's, though I will deny saying that if you ever tell her." Victoria laughed again, and Samuel realized he would do just about anything to keep hearing that sound. "You have yourself a deal, Cowboy." They told Mrs. Thompson that evening over supper. The older woman's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide it by fussing over the roast. "I will miss having you here, dear," she said to Victoria. "You have been such a help to me." "I will still come visit," Victoria promised, "and you are welcome at the farm anytime, both of you." "I will hold you to that," Mrs. Thompson said. Then she turned to her son with a knowing look. "And Samuel, you make sure you treat this girl right. She has been through enough without you adding to her troubles." "Yes, madam," Samuel said, his ears turning red. "I plan to." Victoria moved back to her farm the following week. Samuel helped her transport her few belongings, which amounted to little more than some clothes and a few personal items. The house was dusty and smelled of disuse, but it was structurally sound. Samuel spent the first day helping her clean while Victoria rediscovered all the little details she had forgotten. The way the morning sun came through the kitchen window, the view of the creek from the bedroom, the particular creak of the third step on the front porch. "It is good to be home," Victoria said that evening as she and Samuel sat on the porch steps, watching the sun set over her land. "I did not think I would ever feel this way again." "I am glad you are here," Samuel said. "And I was thinking, if you are serious about raising cattle, I know a rancher who is looking to sell off some of his breeding stock. Good animals, fair prices. I could introduce you if you want." "That would be wonderful," Victoria said. "Though I will need to be careful about money until I can start bringing in some income. The chickens will be quicker to pay off than cattle." "Smart thinking," Samuel agreed. "Start with the chickens, build up slowly. No need to rush into debt again." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Samuel would come by in the mornings before he headed to whatever ranch job he had lined up for the day. He would help Victoria with the heavier work, mending fences, repairing the barn, fixing the chicken coop that had fallen into disrepair. Then he would head off to work, and Victoria would spend her days setting up her new venture. She bought a dozen chickens from a neighbor and started selling eggs in town. The money was small but steady, and every coin she earned felt like a victory. In the evenings, Samuel would return and they would have dinner together. Victoria was true to her word about paying him in meals, and she took great pride in setting a good table. They would talk for hours, sharing their days, their dreams, their fears. Samuel told her about his father, who had died when Samuel was 16, leaving him as the man of the house. Victoria told him about her sister in Missouri, and how she was thinking about writing to her, to let her know where she was, and maybe start mending that old rift. "You should," Samuel encouraged. "Life is too short to let pride keep you from the people you love." "Is that what we are doing?" Victoria asked, her heart beating faster. Loving each other, Samuel set down his coffee cup and reached across the table to take her hand. "I am. I have been for a while now, but I did not want to pressure you into saying it back before you were ready." Victoria squeezed his hand, feeling the now familiar warmth that spread through her whenever he was near. "I think I have been falling in love with you since the day you offered me a job at your mother's boarding house. Maybe even before that, in ways I could not acknowledge while I was still married. But yes, Samuel, I love you." Samuel stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. He came around the table and pulled Victoria to her feet, kissing her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. "Victoria Harper, will you let me court you properly? I want to do this right. I want to take you to church socials and buy you nice things and introduce you as my girl to everyone in town." "I thought that was what we have been doing," Victoria said, smiling against his lips. "Well, yes, but I want to make it official," Samuel said. "I want everyone to know that you are spoken for." "Then yes," Victoria said, "you may court me, Samuel Thompson, though I think we might be moving a bit backward here, considering you already bought me a farm." Samuel laughed. "I suppose we are doing things in our own order. But as long as we end up in the same place, I do not much care about the journey." "And where is that?" Victoria asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Married," Samuel said simply. "You as my wife, me as your husband, a life built together on this land. Maybe some kids running around if we are blessed, growing old together watching the sunset from this porch. That is where I want to end up." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "That sounds perfect." True to his word, Samuel began courting Victoria properly. He would pick her up on Sunday mornings in a borrowed wagon, cleaned and polished until it shone, and drive her to church. He would sit beside her in the pew, his arm brushing against hers, his voice joining hers in the hymns. Afterward, he would walk her through town, stopping to introduce her to anyone they met as his girl, his face beaming with pride. The townspeople had mixed reactions. Some were happy for Victoria, glad to see the widow finding happiness again. Others whispered behind their hands about how quick she was to move on from poor Thomas, conveniently forgetting that Thomas had been far from a devoted husband. Victoria learned to ignore the whispers, holding her head high and Samuel's arm a little tighter. One Sunday after church, as they were walking past the general store, a man stepped out in front of them. He was well dressed, his suit expensive, and his shoes polished to a high shine. Victoria did not recognize him, but Samuel's whole body went tense beside her. "Samuel Thompson," the man said, his voice cold. "I heard you were still in these parts." "Mr. Morton," Samuel said evenly. "I did not expect to see you here." Victoria's eyes widened. This was Charles Morton, the man who had bought her farm from the bank and then sold it to Samuel. What was he doing in Fort Worth? "I came to see what was so special about that little farm that someone would pay me $100 over what I paid for it," Morton said, his eyes sliding to Victoria with obvious appraisal. "Now I see." "Tell me, miss, did this cowboy mention that he spent his entire savings to buy your property? That he is now practically destitute because of you?" "Mrs. Harper knows everything," Samuel said firmly, "and my finances are none of your concern." "Mrs. Harper," Morton said, as if tasting the name. "The widow, I assume. How convenient for you both. The grieving widow and the hero cowboy saving the day." His tone made it clear what he thought of the situation, and it was not flattering. Victoria felt anger flash through her, hot and bright. "Mr. Morton, I do not know what you are implying, but I suggest you move along. Samuel's business with you is concluded, and you have no reason to be speaking to either of us this way." Morton's eyebrows rose. "A spitfire, too. How charming. Well, do enjoy the farm, Mrs. Harper. I hope it brings you everything you are looking for." The way he said it made it sound like an insult. He tipped his hat mockingly and walked away, leaving Victoria and Samuel standing on the wooden sidewalk. Victoria was shaking with anger, but Samuel just pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "Ignore him," Samuel said. "He is just bitter because he thinks he could have gotten more money if he had waited. Men like him do not understand doing something for reasons other than profit." "He tried to make it sound dirty," Victoria said, "like I was using you or you were using me." "We know the truth," Samuel said. "That is all that matters. Let the Charles Mortons of the world think what they want. They do not know anything about us or what we have together." Victoria took a deep breath and nodded. Samuel was right. They knew the truth of their relationship, the genuine care and growing love between them. That was real. Everything else was just noise. The months passed, and Victoria's farm began to truly thrive. The chickens laid eggs regularly, and she built up a steady clientele in town. She saved every penny she could, already making plans to buy those cattle Samuel had mentioned. Samuel continued to help whenever he could, though his ranch work kept him busy. One evening in early December, as the first real cold snap of winter settled over Fort Worth, Samuel showed up at Victoria's door with a nervous energy that was unusual for him. She invited him in, offering him coffee to warm up, but he waved it away. "Victoria, I need to ask you something," Samuel said, pacing in front of the fireplace. "I have been thinking about this for weeks, and I cannot wait any longer." Victoria's heart started to race. She had a feeling she knew where this was going, but she did not want to assume. "What is it, Samuel?" Samuel stopped pacing and turned to face her. Then, to her surprise, he dropped to one knee right there in her kitchen. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond set in it. "Victoria Harper, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You are strong and brave and beautiful, and every day with you is better than the last. I know we have not been courting for very long by traditional standards, but I have known since the day I first saw you that you were the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and your partner and your best friend for the rest of our lives?" Victoria did not even have to think about her answer. "Yes," she said, dropping to her knees in front of him. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you." Samuel's face broke into the widest smile Victoria had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. Then he was kissing her, his hands cupping her face, and she was kissing him back, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed. "We are sitting on my kitchen floor. Best seat in the house," Samuel said, grinning, "though we should probably get up before our knees give out." He helped her to her feet, keeping her hand in his thumb running over the ring on her finger. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "My mother gave it to me last week when I told her I was planning to propose. She said my grandmother would have wanted you to have it." "It is perfect," Victoria said, admiring the way the firelight caught the diamond. "Everything is perfect." They set the wedding date for the following spring, wanting to give Victoria time to write to her sister and invite her to the ceremony. To Victoria's surprise and delight, her sister Martha wrote back almost immediately, apologizing for the years of silence and promising to attend the wedding with her husband and 3 children. The winter passed in a flurry of planning and preparation. Victoria and Samuel spent their evenings making lists, discussing where they would live after the wedding. Samuel wanted to move into the farmhouse with Victoria to help her run the place and build it into something they could both be proud of. Victoria loved the idea of having him there permanently, of waking up to him every morning and falling asleep in his arms every night. Mrs. Thompson was overjoyed at the engagement, immediately taking charge of organizing the wedding with the efficiency of a general planning a campaign. She recruited every woman she knew to help with preparations, and soon Victoria found herself swept up in fittings for her dress, planning the menu for the wedding breakfast, and debating the merits of various flower arrangements. "I am so happy for you both, Mrs. Thompson said one afternoon as she helped Victoria adjust the hem of her wedding dress. "Samuel has been alone for too long, throwing himself into work and never letting anyone get close. You are good for him, dear. You make him happy in a way I have not seen since his father died." "He makes me happy too," Victoria said, looking at herself in the mirror. The dress was simple but beautiful, made of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She barely recognized herself, this woman with bright eyes and a genuine smile. A year ago, she had been broken and lost, watching her life fall apart. Now she was here, about to marry a man she loved, with a farm that was hers and a future that looked bright. The wedding took place on a beautiful April morning in 1880. The small church in Fort Worth was packed with friends and neighbors, all dressed in their Sunday best. Victoria walked down the aisle on the arm of a family friend, her eyes locked on Samuel waiting for her at the altar. He looked handsome in a new suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he watched her approach. Martha and her family had arrived the day before, and the reunion between the sisters had been tearful and joyful. All the old hurts were forgotten as they embraced, both apologizing and promising to never let so much time pass without speaking again. Martha's children, 2 boys and a girl, had immediately taken to the farm, running around exploring while their parents caught up. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Samuel's hands shook slightly as he slipped the wedding band onto Victoria's finger, joining the engagement ring already there. Victoria's voice was strong and clear as she recited her vows, promising to love and honor Samuel for the rest of her days. When the preacher finally pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation started crying. The wedding breakfast was held at the farm, with tables set up in the yard under the spring sunshine. Mrs. Thompson had outdone herself with the food, and there was more than enough for everyone. The children ran around playing games while the adults ate and talked and celebrated the newlyweds. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange, Samuel took Victoria's hand and led her away from the party, down to the creek that ran through the back of the property. They stood on the bank, hand in hand, listening to the water burble over the rocks. "Happy?" Samuel asked, pulling Victoria close. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Victoria said, leaning into his embrace. "A year ago I lost everything. Today I gained everything. It does not seem real sometimes." "It is real," Samuel assured her, kissing the top of her head. "This is our life now. You and me and this land and whatever future we build together. All real, all ours." "I love you, Samuel Thompson," Victoria said, turning in his arms to face him. "I love you so much it sometimes scares me." "I love you too, Victoria Thompson," Samuel said, emphasizing her new last name with a grin. "And you do not have to be scared. I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me now." "Good," Victoria said, standing on her toes to kiss him, "because I plan to keep you for a very long time." The party continued into the evening, but eventually the guests began to leave, heading back to town in wagons and on horseback. Martha and her family were staying at the boarding house for a few more days, giving the newlyweds some privacy. Mrs. Thompson was the last to leave, hugging them both tightly and reminding them that they were expected for Sunday dinner at her house the following week. Finally, Victoria and Samuel were alone in their home, truly alone for the first time as husband and wife. Samuel carried Victoria over the threshold, making her laugh, and then set her down gently in the middle of the kitchen. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thompson," he said softly. "I am home," Victoria said, looking around at the house she had almost lost, now filled with signs of the life she and Samuel were building together. "Finally, I am really home." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, savoring the peace and joy of the moment. Then Samuel took her hand and led her to the bedroom, closing the door on the rest of the world. The first year of their marriage was both challenging and wonderful. They worked hard to build up the farm, investing in breeding cattle like Victoria had dreamed. Samuel proved to be as good with cattle as he was with horses, and under their combined care, the herd began to grow. Victoria's egg business continued to thrive, and she started selling butter and cheese as well, bringing in steady income. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the way married couples do. Victoria learned that Samuel was grumpy in the mornings until he had his coffee, and that he had a habit of singing off-key when he worked. Samuel learned that Victoria was fiercely competitive about her cooking, always trying to make each meal better than the last, and that she had nightmares sometimes about losing the farm again. When the nightmares came, Samuel would hold her and remind her that the farm was theirs, paid for fair and square, and that no bank could take it away. He did not tell her that he sometimes had his own fears, worries that he was not good enough for her, that he would somehow fail her. But Victoria seemed to sense it anyway, and she would reassure him with her words and her touch that he was exactly what she needed. By their first anniversary, Victoria was pregnant. They discovered it in late March, and Samuel was so excited he rode all the way to town to tell his mother before Victoria could stop him. Mrs. Thompson immediately began knitting baby clothes, her needles flying as she created tiny sweaters and blankets. The pregnancy was not easy. Victoria was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. Samuel fretted over her constantly, bringing her tea and crackers, rubbing her back when she was ill. As the baby grew, Victoria's energy returned, and she insisted on continuing to work on the farm, though Samuel tried to get her to rest more. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Victoria would say whenever Samuel tried to take over her chores. "Women have been having babies and working for thousands of years. I will be fine." Still, Samuel could not help but worry. The thought of anything happening to Victoria or the baby terrified him in a way nothing else ever had. He found himself praying more than he had since he was a child, asking God to keep his family safe. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1881. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Samuel thought he might lose his mind from the helplessness of hearing Victoria in pain and not being able to do anything about it. But Mrs. Thompson was there, along with the midwife, and they both assured him that everything was progressing normally. When he finally heard the baby's cry, strong and loud, Samuel felt tears streaming down his face. The midwife cleaned up the baby and handed him to Samuel while she tended to Victoria. Samuel looked down at his son, this tiny perfect person with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be brown like his own, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is beautiful," Samuel whispered. "Victoria, he is so beautiful." Victoria, exhausted but glowing, reached out for the baby. Samuel placed him gently in her arms, and they both stared at their son in wonder. "What should we name him?" Victoria asked softly. They had discussed names for months, debating options and never quite agreeing on one. But looking at his son now, Samuel knew exactly what felt right. "How about James Thompson, after your father?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Her father had died when she was young, but she had loved him dearly and talked about him often. "James Thompson," she repeated, smiling. "It is perfect." Little James was a good baby, though he kept them up plenty at night those first few months. Samuel would walk the floor with him, singing those same off-key songs that made Victoria laugh, while Victoria tried to catch a few hours of sleep. During the day, Victoria would strap James to her in a sling she made and continue with her work, the baby sleeping contentedly against her chest. Samuel had never been happier. He would come in from working in the fields or tending the cattle to find Victoria nursing the baby in the rocking chair by the window, humming softly, the afternoon light making her hair glow. Or he would wake in the middle of the night to find her already up with James, changing his diaper and talking to him in that soft, loving voice she used only with their son. "I did not know I could love anyone as much as I love you," Samuel told Victoria one night as they lay in bed, James asleep in his cradle nearby. "And then James came along, and somehow my heart got even bigger. How is that possible?" "That is what love does," Victoria said, snuggling closer to him. "It does not divide, it multiplies. We are very lucky, Samuel." "We are," Samuel agreed. "Though I think it is more than luck. I think it is grace. God's grace giving us another chance after everything we both went through." Victoria was quiet for a moment, thinking about how far they had both come. From that day when she stood on the road watching the bank take her farm, to now, lying in bed with a husband she adored and a son sleeping peacefully nearby, was almost too much to comprehend. "I used to be so angry at God," she admitted. "When Thomas died and I lost the farm, I thought I was being punished for something. I could not understand why everything was falling apart." "And now?" Samuel asked gently. "Now I think maybe those things had to happen to bring me here," Victoria said. "If I had not lost the farm, you never would have bought it back for me. If Thomas had not died, terrible as that sounds, I never would have been free to love you. I do not believe God causes bad things to happen, but I do think He can bring good out of even the worst situations." Samuel kissed her forehead. "I think you might be right about that, and I am grateful every day that our paths crossed when they did." The years that followed were full of hard work and deep contentment. The farm continued to prosper under their careful management. Their herd of cattle grew, and they became known throughout the region for quality breeding stock. Victoria's chicken and dairy business expanded, and she hired a local girl to help her with the work. James grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler who loved following his father around the farm. Samuel would put him on the saddle in front of him and ride around the property, pointing out different things and explaining how everything worked. James would listen with wide eyes, soaking up every word his father said. When James was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born on a warm June morning in 1884. They named her Caroline, after Samuel's grandmother who had owned the engagement ring. Caroline was quieter than James had been, with Victoria's dark eyes and a sweet, calm disposition. Samuel adored his daughter from the moment he laid eyes on her. He would hold her for hours, just watching her sleep, marveling at her tiny fingers and perfect little face. Victoria would tease him about being wrapped around Caroline's little finger, and Samuel would not even bother to deny it. With 2 children, life became busier than ever. But somehow, Samuel and Victoria always found time for each other. They made it a point to sit on the porch together after the children were in bed, talking about their day, making plans for the future, or just enjoying the comfortable silence of being together. They paid off the loan to Samuel much faster than either of them expected. Victoria insisted on calculating the interest properly and paying every cent she owed him. Samuel tried to argue that it was not necessary since they were married, and everything was shared between them anyway, but Victoria was firm. She wanted to prove that she could do it, that she could take his investment and turn it into something profitable enough to pay him back with interest. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met," Samuel said when Victoria handed him the final payment, 7 years after he had bought the farm. "I learned from the best," Victoria said, kissing him. "Your mother did not raise a quitter, and neither did mine." "What are you going to do with all this money?" Victoria asked, gesturing to the stack of bills on the table. "Put it in the bank for the children's future," Samuel said immediately. "Maybe James will want to go to college someday, or Caroline might want to travel. Whatever they need, this will be here for them." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, as they seemed to do so easily these days. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour," Samuel said, pulling her into his arms, "but I never get tired of hearing it." In 1887, when James was 6 and Caroline was 3, Samuel and Victoria decided to expand the house. They added 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, acknowledging that their family might continue to grow and wanting to be prepared. Sure enough, their 3rd child, a boy they named William, was born that fall. William was a surprise in many ways. He arrived 2 weeks early and came into the world screaming his head off, a tendency he maintained for the first 6 months of his life. Where James had been curious and Caroline calm, William was intense and demanding. He kept them on their toes and tested their patience, but they loved him fiercely all the same. 3 children, Victoria said one evening as she and Samuel surveyed their brood. James was reading a book by the fire, Caroline was playing with her dolls, and William was finally sleeping in his cradle after a long day of crying. We have 3 beautiful children, a thriving farm, and each other. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure this is real. It is real, Samuel assured her, wrapping his arm around her waist. And it is ours. Everything we built together. As the children grew, the farm continued to prosper. James showed a natural aptitude for working with cattle, spending every spare moment helping his father. Caroline developed her mother's head for business and started keeping the farm's books when she was just 10 years old. William, once he got past the crying phase, turned out to have a gift with horses, able to calm even the most skittish animal. Samuel and Victoria made sure all their children received a good education, hiring a tutor when the local school proved inadequate. They wanted their children to have choices, to be able to make their own way in the world, whether that meant staying on the farm or pursuing other dreams. When James was 15, he asked his father about the history of the farm. "I know it belonged to Mother's first husband," James said carefully, "but I have heard different stories around town about how you and Mother ended up here together." Samuel and Victoria exchanged glances across the dinner table. They had always been honest with their children, but they had also tried to protect them from the harsher details of the past. "Your mother lost the farm after her first husband died," Samuel said carefully. "He had debts that she did not know about and the bank foreclosed. I had some savings and I used them to buy the property back and give it to your mother." "Why?" James asked. "You barely knew her then, from what I understand." "Because I loved her," Samuel said simply. "I had loved her from afar for a long time, and when I had the chance to help her, I took it. Best decision I ever made." "Were you scared?" Caroline asked. "That mother might not love you back," Samuel smiled at his daughter. "Terrified, but some things are worth the risk." Victoria reached across the table and took Samuel's hand. "Your father gave me back more than just the farm," she said to her children. "He gave me back my hope, my future, my life. And then he gave me all of you. We are very blessed." William, who was 10 at the time, made a face. "That is mushy," he said, but he was smiling. "Wait until you fall in love," Victoria said, laughing. "Then you will understand." The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. There were hard times, droughts that tested their resourcefulness, harsh winters that took a toll on the livestock, illnesses that had them sitting up all night with sick children. But there were far more good times. Christmas mornings with the house full of laughter and the smell of Victoria's cinnamon rolls. Summer evenings when the whole family would go down to the creek to cool off. Harvest festivals where their children would compete in contests and win blue ribbons. Samuel's mother lived to see all 3 of her grandchildren grow into young adults before she passed peacefully in her sleep in 1895. Her death hit Samuel hard, but he took comfort in knowing that she had been happy in her final years, surrounded by family and love. Martha and her family visited regularly, usually in the summer when travel was easiest. The cousins grew up close despite the distance, writing letters throughout the year and picking up their friendships as if no time had passed whenever they were together. In 1898, when James was 17, he told his parents that he wanted to stay on the farm rather than go to college. "This is my home," he said. "This land, these cattle, this life. It is what I want. Maybe not what you wanted for me, but it is what I want for myself." Samuel and Victoria were secretly relieved. They had saved diligently for his education, but the thought of the farm passing out of the family someday had always saddened them. With James committed to taking over eventually, they knew their legacy would continue. Caroline, on the other hand, announced at 16 that she wanted to go to normal school and become a teacher. "I want to help children learn," she said. "Like our tutor helped us, I want to make a difference that way." "Then that is exactly what you will do," Victoria said, hugging her daughter tight. "We will make it happen." William, at 14, was still figuring out his path, but he talked about maybe starting a horse training business someday. "There is good money in breaking and training horses," he said. "And I am good at it." "You are," Samuel agreed. "Whatever you decide, we will support you." On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1900, Samuel took Victoria back to the spot by the creek where they had stood on their wedding day. They had made a tradition of going there on every anniversary, but this year felt especially significant. 20 years, Victoria said, shaking her head in wonder. "It has gone so fast." "Fastest 20 years of my life," Samuel agreed, "but also the best. Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one," Victoria said immediately. "Everything that happened, even the hard things, brought us here, brought us to this moment. I would not change any of it." Samuel pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to Victoria. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a chain. She opened it to find tiny photographs of their 3 children inside. "It is beautiful," Victoria breathed. "Samuel, you should not have spent the money." "You are worth every penny and more," Samuel said, taking the locket and fastening it around her neck. "You have given me everything, Victoria. A home, a family, a purpose. The least I can do is buy you a locket." Victoria touched the locket, feeling the weight of it against her chest. "I have something for you too," she said, pulling an envelope from her pocket, "though it is not nearly as romantic as jewelry." Samuel opened the envelope to find a bank statement showing a substantial savings account in both their names. "How did you manage this?" "I have been setting aside money from the egg and dairy business for years," Victoria said. "I wanted to make sure we had something put away for the future, for whatever comes next. Whether it is helping the children get started in their lives, or taking care of ourselves as we get older, or even just taking a trip somewhere we have never been. I want us to have options." "You are incredible," Samuel said, kissing her. "Do you know that? Absolutely incredible." "I learned from you," Victoria said. "You taught me that it is okay to hope for good things, to plan for a future instead of just surviving day to day. Before you, I never thought past the next meal or the next bill. Now I can see years ahead, and they all look bright." As they stood there by the creek, holding each other and watching the water flow past, Samuel thought about the journey that had brought them here. He had been a lonely cowboy with savings and a dream. She had been a widow who had lost everything. Separately, they might have survived, but together, they had thrived. Their children grew and started their own lives. James married a sweet girl from town named Elizabeth in 1902, and they built a house on the far corner of the property, starting their own herd with help from Samuel. Caroline went to normal school and became a teacher as she had dreamed, eventually marrying one of her fellow teachers and moving to Dallas. William started his horse training business and gained a reputation throughout Texas for his skill and patience with difficult animals. By 1905, Samuel and Victoria were grandparents 3 times over, with more grandchildren surely on the way. They had slowed down a bit, letting James take over more of the day-to-day running of the farm, but they still worked every day, still sat on the porch every evening, still found joy in the simple rhythm of the life they had built. One evening, as they sat in their usual spot watching the sun set, Samuel said, "Do you remember the day we met? I mean really met, when I offered you the job at my mother's boarding house?" "Of course I remember," Victoria said. "I was standing on the road with a foreclosure notice in my hand, thinking my life was over. And now look at us, Samuel said. 3 children, 3 grandchildren, a thriving farm, and more blessings than we can count. It is more than I ever dreamed of, Victoria admitted. Back then, I could not see past the next day. I certainly could not imagine all of this. I could, Samuel said softly. From the moment I saw you, I could imagine a life with you. Maybe not the exact details, but the feeling of it. Coming home to you every night, building something together. Growing old by your side. I knew it was what I wanted, even when it seemed impossible. Victoria leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. I am so glad you were brave enough to take a chance on a bitter widow with nothing to her name. You were never bitter, Samuel said. Hurt, yes, scared, definitely, but never bitter. You had too much strength for that, too much hope buried under all that pain. I just helped you find it again. We helped each other, Victoria corrected. You gave me back my farm and my future. But I gave you a family and a home. We each brought something to this marriage, and together we made something beautiful. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors fade from the sky. In the distance, they could hear James's children playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The cattle were lowing softly in the fields. Somewhere a horse whinnied, probably one of William's latest projects. You think we will have more grandchildren? Samuel asked, a smile in his voice. Oh, undoubtedly, Victoria said. Caroline looked very suspiciously green around the gills when she visited last month, and Elizabeth told me just yesterday that she is expecting again in the spring. More babies, Samuel said contentedly. More chances to teach them to ride and tell them stories and spoil them rotten the way grandparents are supposed to. You do that too well already, Victoria teased. Poor James is going to have his hands full with all the bad habits you are teaching them. That is what grandparents are for, Samuel said. To give them sugar and send them home. Victoria laughed, the sound as warm and genuine as it had been when they first fell in love. I love you, Samuel Thompson. I love the life we built, and the family we made, and even the way you spoil our grandchildren against all common sense. I love you too, Victoria Thompson, Samuel said, pulling her closer. Every single day for the rest of my life I will love you. The years that followed were gentle ones. Samuel and Victoria eased into the role of elders, advising rather than directing, supporting rather than controlling. They watched their children raise their own families, making their own decisions and their own mistakes, building their own legacies. James and Elizabeth eventually had 5 children who grew up running wild over the farm, learning the land the way their father had. Caroline and her husband had 3 daughters who all became teachers like their mother, spreading education throughout Texas. William married late, to a woman who loved horses as much as he did, and they had twin boys who were as skilled with animals as their father. The farm continued to prosper under James's management, though Samuel and Victoria remained actively involved well into their 60s. Samuel still rode out to check on the cattle most days, though now he took one of his grandsons with him more often than not. Victoria still tended her chickens and her garden, though Elizabeth handled most of the dairy business now. In 1915, Samuel and Victoria celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a huge party on the farm, inviting everyone they had ever known. The house and yard were full of people, 3 generations of family plus friends from all over Texas. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. At one point in the evening, James called for everyone's attention. I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my parents today, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. But more than that, I want to thank my parents for everything they have given us. My father taught me what it means to work hard and treat people fairly. My mother taught me that strength comes in many forms and that persistence can overcome almost any obstacle. He paused, emotion choking his voice. But most importantly, they both taught me what real love looks like. Not the easy love of good times, but the deep, enduring love that weathers storms and grows stronger with every challenge. They have built a legacy here, not just in this land and these cattle, but in all of us. In the values they instilled, in the love they showed, in the example they set. So please join me in raising a glass to Samuel and Victoria Thompson, the finest people I know. Everyone raised their glasses, calling out congratulations and well wishes. Samuel and Victoria stood together, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. When the toasts finally died down and the party resumed, they slipped away to their spot by the creek, needing a moment alone together. 35 years, Victoria said, shaking her head. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you handed me the deed to this farm. Other times it feels like a lifetime ago. It is a lifetime, Samuel said, the best lifetime I could have imagined. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not helped me that day? Victoria asked. If you had just walked past and let me figure things out on my own? Never, Samuel said firmly, because I know exactly what would have happened. You would have figured it out because that is who you are. You would have found another job, saved your money, worked yourself to the bone until you could afford another place. You would have survived and eventually thrived because you are the strongest person I know. But Victoria prompted, hearing the unspoken word. But I would have lived the rest of my life alone, Samuel said quietly. Working hard, saving money, achieving my goals, and I would have been successful by most measures, but I would have been lonely. I would have missed out on the greatest adventure of my life, which is loving you and building this family with you. Victoria turned to face him, placing her hands on either side of his face. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the years, and his hair was more gray than brown now, but he was still her Samuel, still the man who had given her everything when she had nothing. We saved each other, she said softly. That is what I believe. You saved me from losing myself in grief and hardship. I saved you from a life of loneliness and isolation. We were exactly what each other needed, exactly when we needed it. Samuel kissed her, a gentle press of lips that spoke of decades of love and commitment. I would do it all again, he said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy and every sorrow. I would choose you every single time. They returned to the party hand in hand, ready to celebrate with their family. The evening wore on, full of laughter and stories and the kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by people you love. As the sun set and the stars came out, someone started a bonfire, and the children roasted marshmallows while the adults told stories of the old days. Samuel found himself recounting the story of buying the farm for Victoria, a tale their children had heard many times but never seemed to tire of. I spent every penny I had, he said. Cleaned out my savings account, left myself practically broke. My mother thought I had lost my mind. What did you think? One of the grandchildren asked. Samuel looked across the fire at Victoria, who was laughing at something Elizabeth was saying. I thought I was the luckiest man alive to have the chance to help her, and I was right. As the night grew late, the guests began to leave. The children helped clean up, carrying dishes into the house and banking the fire. Finally, only family remained, and they too began to say their goodnights, heading to their own homes or to the guest rooms in the house. Samuel and Victoria climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the same room where they had spent their wedding night 35 years earlier. The house was quiet now, the excitement of the day fading into peaceful contentment. That was a good party, Victoria said, unpinning her hair and letting it fall down her back. It was more silver than dark now, but Samuel still thought it was beautiful. "It was perfect," Samuel agreed, unbuttoning his shirt. "Though I am exhausted." "When did we get too old for parties?" Victoria laughed. "When we started counting our grandchildren in double digits, I think." They climbed into bed, and Samuel pulled Victoria close, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist. This was how they had slept for decades, fitting together like two pieces of a puzzle. "Samuel," Victoria said softly into the darkness. Thank you for everything. For this life, for our family, for loving me even when I did not know how to love myself. Thank you." Samuel kissed the back of her neck. "Thank you for saying yes to me all those years ago, for taking a chance on a cowboy with more heart than sense, for building this life with me." They drifted off to sleep, comfortable and content in the knowledge that they had created something lasting and good. The farm would continue long after they were gone, passed down to their children and grandchildren. But more than that, the love they had shared, the example they had set, would ripple out through generations, teaching their descendants what it meant to be brave enough to help someone in need, to take a chance on love, to build something beautiful out of the ashes of loss. The years continued to pass gently. Samuel and Victoria slowed down more, spending more time on the porch and less in the fields. But they remained active in the family business, offering advice when asked and marveling at how their grandchildren were growing up so fast. In 1920, they celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their immediate family. Samuel had some trouble getting around by then, his knees bothering him after a lifetime of hard work. Victoria's hands were gnarled with arthritis, making some tasks difficult. But they refused to complain, grateful for the years they had been given. 40 years, Samuel said as they sat on the porch that evening, watching yet another sunset. Longer than I ever dared to hope for when I was a young cowboy working other people's ranches. "We have been blessed," Victoria agreed. 3 wonderful children, 12 grandchildren at last count, and 2 great-grandchildren on the way, not to mention this farm still producing, still providing for our family. "It is all because of you," Samuel said. "You took what I gave you and turned it into something incredible. The farm, the family, all of it. You made it happen." "We made it happen," Victoria corrected, as she always did. "Together, always together." They sat in companionable silence, holding hands and watching the day fade into night. In the distance, they could hear James calling his children in for supper. Closer by, they could hear the familiar sounds of the farm settling down for the night. It was a symphony they had been listening to for 40 years, and it never got old. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Victoria thought about the young widow she had been, standing on a dusty road with a foreclosure notice in her hand, thinking her life was over. She could barely remember that woman now. So much had changed since then. She had been given a second chance, an opportunity to rebuild, and she had taken it with both hands. And Samuel, her Samuel, had been the catalyst for it all. He had given her more than just the farm. He had given her hope, love, purpose, and a future she had never dared to dream of. In return, she had given him a home, a family, and a lifetime of partnership and love. It was a fair trade, she thought with a smile. More than fair. It was perfect. Samuel and Victoria lived to see their 50th wedding anniversary in 1930, a milestone they celebrated surrounded by their large, loving family. By then, they were both in their 70s, moving slowly and tiring easily, but still sharp-minded and deeply in love. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1932, at the age of 79. Victoria held his hand as he slipped away, whispering words of love and gratitude for the 52 years they had shared. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testament to the life he had lived and the impact he had made. Victoria lived another 3 years, staying active in the farm management until the very end. She spent her final years surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, telling stories of the early days and making sure everyone knew the history of the land they walked on. She passed away in her sleep on a warm summer night in 1935, just 2 months shy of her 81st birthday. They buried her next to Samuel in the family plot on a hill overlooking the farm, where she could always watch over the land she had loved so much. On her headstone, James had inscribed, "Victoria Thompson, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She lost everything and rebuilt it stronger than before." 1854–1935. Next to it, Samuel's headstone read, "Samuel Thompson, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He gave everything for love and never regretted a moment." 1853–1932. The farm continued to thrive under James's care and eventually under his children's care after him. The story of how Samuel bought the farm back for Victoria and gave her the deed became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder of where they came from and the values that built their family. The little farmhouse on the creek in Fort Worth, Texas, remained in the Thompson family for generations, a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and the courage to take a chance on another person. And though the faces changed and the world around them evolved, the heart of what Samuel and Victoria built together remained constant, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone.